Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ex Post Watcho, your favorite movie retrospective podcast. Every week we watch a movie from a long time ago and see what we think about it today. As always, I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Ilana. How you doing today, Ilana?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm good. This is a big one. This is an exciting one. We're going to watch Donnie Darko. Tell me about your experiences with Donnie Darko.
I feel like I'm in a therapist's office, which is fitting for the movie, I guess. I saw this. I don't think I saw this in theaters, but I saw it not long after it came out. I guess I was in my later days of high school. And first things first, I fell in love with Jake Gyllenhaal, and we've been madly in love since. And
I've seen The Shrine.
And
not as good as My Shrine, by the way, but whatever.
You know what, though? I can't even argue with that. This movie was huge. It was like a really important movie, I think, for a lot of people our age. It really captured that sort of outcast, feeling like a weirdo, feeling like, am I insane or is the world crazy? Like, I think that's why it meant so much to myself and a lot of people I know. And it asked a lot of questions about, what are we doing here? And what is the universe? And what, questions that I continue to ask, but I think was really knee deep in, during my rageful teenage years. So yeah, this is like a really important movie in terms of like me growing up. And I haven't seen it probably for a handful of years, but I do try to watch it pretty, not too infrequently. I really do like it. I'm really hoping it holds up for me. I think it will, even just for nostalgia's sake. The people cannot see this, but you're nodding your head a lot. I'm assuming you have kind of a similar experience with this movie.
Yeah, pretty much like bang on to what you said. I mean, we're the same age, so this, we would have been the same age watching it. I remember watching this. It was grade 12. I was hanging with my buddy. We picked it up at the video store. No idea what it was. I'm not sure how we ended up choosing that one. And then we watched it, and then we're like, that was crazy. That was the best movie I ever saw. And then we immediately watched it again. Yeah. It definitely, like, it's a movie that makes me feel nostalgic for being 17, 18 years old. The music in it, like, it's got a really good soundtrack, and some of those songs, I hear them and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a kid again. Yeah, I remember really liking it. I haven't seen it in a while. It's probably been like a decade.
Yeah.
From what I remember of it is that it's a very cool movie. Like it's really atmospheric. It's got kind of a weird premise. Jake Gyllenhaal, I think this was the first time I saw him. I know he was in like October Sky before, but this is like the first time probably the first Jake Gyllenhaal movie I actually saw. There's a bunch of other actors in it. Well, Maggie Gyllenhaal's in it, his sister. Yep. We get Patrick Swayze, Drew Barrymore, Noah Wyle, Mary McDonnell from Battlestar Galactica, and that guy you like,
Beth Grant.
Sorry, who?
And that guy I like.
That the dad, the dad from Donnie Darko.
Oh yeah, Holmes Osborne.
Sure, I don't know his name.
Yeah. He's great. And Beth Grant, who I think is great and so underrated. And she pops up in these wonderful roles in all of these movies. And I mean, I think we all love her, but you don't necessarily know her and love her until you're like, oh, that lady.
Yeah, I just had to look at which character that is. I did not know. I don't know this actress. I'll do some research. Yeah, it definitely is like, it's about being kind of a mopey outcast teenager. I think like it definitely tapped into that sort of feeling that I was experiencing, and my friend definitely felt that way. That fucking Mad World, Tears of Fear song, the piano version, it's kind of bullshit in a way. It's a really good cover of that song, but that song is just like so... I don't know how to describe it. The lyrics are like so on the nose if you're just like, young, sad, and vaguely suicidal, I guess. Let's put it that way.
Really spoke to us all.
Yeah, you're like, oh, the dreams I'm dying, those are the best ones. Oh. And then it later got used in a Gears of War video game advertisement, and I was like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah. What I think doesn't work about this movie so much is the sci-fi bullshit. I think that stuff is kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I've forgotten a lot of it. We'll see. But like, I remember that stuff always just kind of was like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I think though this was, well, for me anyway, this was also, I've talked about this before, at a time where I was really convinced I was going to go to film school and become a filmmaker. And I think that I appreciated the kind of weird risks it took. Because I think at the time too, and just before this, we've talked about this before, a lot of teen movies were coming out, which were very unrelatable. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream and like Not Another Teen Movie. And I mean, that's supposed to be
the movies where the kids go to parties and have fun.
Yeah. And they all looked like they were like, 25, and it wasn't relatable stuff for a lot of kids, or kids like us anyway. And so I appreciated that this movie was made for, or I'm assuming that was the target audience, and that it took some weird risks, and it said, let's try this, because I agree with you. I think that it's going to look quite dated. Also, like the effects that are in this and some of that content. But in terms of just taking a risk and trying to put something out that's kind of weird, and, for an indie film, like this wouldn't be made by like some major studio for like hundreds of millions of dollars because it's too much of a risk. I kind of appreciate it in a way.
Yeah, and my I guess complaint with the sci-fi stuff, I don't really care about the visual so much. I know some of that is definitely going to look funny. I'm just thinking of like there's a certain effect that I'm sure will look like old computer stuff.
Yeah.
It was more just like the actual like what is going on here. It gets a little convoluted. But whatever. I think what this movie really does well is atmosphere and vibe, and I have some recollections of just like how vibey it is. It feels almost like horror in certain parts. So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this. They made a sequel in 2007. In 2009 called S Darko, and it went direct to video. Someday I got to watch that because oh boy, that sounds terrible. Have you seen it?
No, I only heard about it like a couple of months ago, actually. I hadn't even heard of it before then. So, yeah, I'm going to probably hunt it down one day and see what kind of a mess it is. But
it's got a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. So
thanks.
Maybe we'll watch that. We'll watch that later. All right. Let's get on with it. We're going to watch Donnie Darko, and we'll be back. Well, I just woke up from a fugue state and wandered home and found myself in front of this microphone, getting ready to talk about Donnie Darko. First of all, before we start, I need to apologize to Tears for Fears. In the intro section, I called them Tears of Fears, and given how much I like 80s music, I feel pretty embarrassed about that. So with that out of the way, Ilana, what'd you think of Donnie Darko?
So this movie, I think I mentioned, was like really influential when I was growing up. I haven't watched it in several years, and I think that as a grown-up who has actual real life problems, I really felt it a lot less than I did when I first watched it. I still really enjoyed it, and there are things about this movie I really love. And certainly for nostalgia's sake, I really loved revisiting it. But I don't think it's as good a movie as I used to think it was. And I think I related more to Mom and Dad than anyone in this film. And there was a lot that I didn't notice before that this time I was like, wait, what? and a lot of stuff that I had completely forgotten about, that are huge plot points. So I think I might have been like just a little warm for Jake Gyllenhaal, and it influenced my rational thinking a little bit. Yeah. What about you? What about this rewatching?
Donnie Darko is bullshit. And I say that out of a sense of love and frustration. This movie is really good in a lot of ways. It does some stuff incredibly well. And I think off the bat, if you've never seen this movie, totally worth watching. It's worth checking out. I think overall it's a good movie. The things it does well, it's incredibly atmospheric. This reminds me a little bit of the Mothman prophecies, because it kind of has a similar problem. It sets a vibe so well, and that vibe is, it's got the 80s nostalgia. Something I realized watching this actually is like, oh yeah, this movie's set in the 80s, and it came out later, and like now that's just like so normal, but like that was kind of a thing at the time. So it's got this like 80s vibe. It's mysterious and creepy and kind of horror like it's scary. There's kind of a few moments where it's like, ugh, like I actually am startled. And it also captures a certain sense of basically being a teenager. I think, we both saw it as teenagers, and I think part of the reason we liked it so much at the time is it does evoke that. Yeah. But where it loses me is about a third of the way through to halfway through. I kind of just I get kind of bored, because it becomes about this plot and all the time travel stuff. And I don't think that's executed particularly well. I don't actually think it makes a lot of sense. And B, I kind of just don't care. I think some people actually like this movie because they like to get into the weeds about like time travel. And they're like, well, this is what's happening. It's like, I don't give a shit. That's not what makes the movie good. What makes the good parts of the movie is like the atmosphere and the performances and characters. Like that's another thing I think works really well is the main characters and the supporting characters and stuff like that. So yeah, watching it this time, I have this feeling every time I watch this movie. It starts off and I'm like, Donnie Darko. Yeah, I'm so sold. And then about halfway through, I'm like, Donnie Darko. God damn it. Like this movie. And then I just sort of walk away a bit disappointed. So yeah, that's what happened this time. Once it got going, I was like, oh yeah, okay. I remember this feeling of disappointment. So I am sort of glad to have done that and kind of put my thoughts together about the movie.
Yeah, I feel like this movie is sort of like a teenager. Like it thinks it's a lot deeper and more complicated than it really is.
So a possible reason for that is Richard Kelly was 26 years old when this film was released. He would have been about 23 when he wrote the script. And it feels like a movie written by a 23-year-old guy reminiscing on his high school experiences.
Yeah, I definitely, while I was watching this, I was like, this feels like a very young director's movie, somebody who's, it's their first or second feature kind of thing. But then, so I was sort of like justifying certain things about it. But then I thought back to a few weeks ago when we watched Memento, and Christopher Nolan's second feature film was Memento, which seems so incredibly sophisticated compared to this. I mean, I think that the audience is different for each of these films, but I mean that they're their own things. I mean, that you can't really compare them that much, but I mean, they kind of have similar themes in some ways. And so I kept thinking back to that and how I think that movie's a masterpiece. And then this one was like, oh yeah, this is this movie that meant a lot when I was younger, and so I still really appreciate it. But definitely, yeah, watching it now, it's a very different experience.
So, fun trivia fact, it looked like the movie wasn't going to get a theater release, and it was going to be direct-to-video. Christopher Nolan was one of the influential factors in securing it a cinema release.
What a guy!
Yeah. I do think it is a good comparison, though, because, yeah, these are early works by young directors. And what Nolan really does well in Memento is just like story. Like he's got a story to tell, and he's going to tell it to you as efficiently and interestingly as possible. And I think what Richard Kelly brings, so he wrote the script, and I don't think he was originally intended to be the director, but it ended up being him, which is kind of surprising because it's a very ambitious movie for a first-time director, especially with all the kind of like weird visual stuff going on. What I think he brings is style, and I think he does it really well. Like, this is a really impressive looking, feeling, sounding movie. There's some kind of like visual gimmickry, you could call it. Like, there's that kind of stuff because it's the 90s and everybody was doing that kind of stuff, but it works really well. The scene where Head Over Heels is playing when they go to the high school for the first time, it's kind of just like alternating between slow motion and fast forward, and the camera like spins around. Totally pointless scene, I guess, other than sort of giving you the like high school vibe, but it's so cool because the song is great and it looks good. It's like almost a little music video in the middle of the movie. So I think like he does so much of that stuff really well, and I think like he has a really good cast working in this movie, so they definitely kind of bring a lot of like chops themselves. But I think like the performances all work together so well that like I think he's good enough at directing people that he has that skill. But I think where it really goes wrong is like just the script. I think the script, not necessarily even, I think the dialogue is good. It's just the story beats and all that kind of stuff. That's where it just kind of completely goes off the rails.
Yeah, I agree. This is, I don't know. Let's just get into it.
Let's go relive Donnie Darko. So Donnie Darko wakes up on the road and he is all alone. It's early morning. He has sleepwalked.
He's on his bicycle.
Sleep biked. And he was on the Ambien. And he gets up and rides his bike, and then The Killing Moon starts playing. Yeah.
That's when the movie
fucking
really starts.
Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that song is really good. And that opening is, again, it's sort of just like a visual atmosphere, you know, hey, it's the 80s, we're in the suburbs. Here's the family. One of the things about the director's cut, so I watched the director's cut as well. We watched the theatrical cut. There is a director's cut. I'll get into more details of it later. But I was wondering, we had this conversation, which one should we watch? Have I seen the director's cut? Like, how different is it? The way you can tell is because in the director's cut, they replace The Killing Mood with an INXS song. Now, I like INXS, and that song is good. It's a perfectly good song.
What song is it?
Never Gonna Tear Us Apart or something like that. I don't have the title in front of me. Yeah, it's a good song. It kind of works, but it totally doesn't work at the same time. Like, it just absolutely does not fit that scene. You lose the emotion. So that's how you know. If you watch Donnie Darko and immediately got angry that they took out The Killing Moon, you have seen the director's cut.
That's a wild choice. That song, even more than Mad World, which I know we'll talk about later and you have lots of thoughts on, to me is like the most iconic sort of song that's in. And this is a great soundtrack and a great score. And this just sets us up perfectly, I think, for the mood of the movie, like you were saying. And I think that those feelings of, you know, like we were talking about, like being younger and watching this movie, those kind of come flooding back when you hear that and you see those. I'm a big fan of kids in anywhere from the 60s to 80s riding their bicycles all over town. There's a certain feeling that sort of, you know, evokes in you. Us older folk who used to just, you know, latchkey kids used to just ride bicycles around town all day until it got dark. So
we did that in the 90s too.
Yeah. And I like this little tour of suburbia that we get. It's very Poltergeist.
Yeah, this is an upper class neighborhood for sure.
Yeah. And this movie actually reminded me, I actually Googled, was Poltergeist a big influence on this film? Because there are a lot of things, like we get a shot of the dad asleep in front of the TV, which I know is it's not specific to Poltergeist, but the TV's fuzzy and the shot is like very similar to what it is in Poltergeist. And the suburbia bike ride on the way home to meet the family. and the parents and their relationship and sort of the politics of the time being mentioned and having this sort of undercurrent of what is the political landscape. It really reminded me of Poltergeist in a lot of ways.
That is a very astute observation. Yeah, there is a lot of similarities. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, dad watching the George Bush debating Dukakis. Yeah. Get him, George. So I was reading some stuff about this, and so I found this trivia factoid, which I think is kind of ridiculous. Kelly was adamant to set the film in 1988, thinking it would be fresh to explore the era and depict a society that he had not seen in a film before. Really? We didn't see 80s suburbia before? Okay. Later, he admitted he felt pressured to make the setting more contemporary. However, he could not figure out how to make the story work in such a setting and retain the original setting. That is ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense to me. You could have set this movie anytime.
Yeah.
I think he just thought the 80s were cool.
Yeah, maybe he was trying to... How old is he? He's just about a decade or and a half older than we are, maybe?
Yeah, he was born in 75. So, like, this would have been... The period the movie was set in, he would have been, I guess, 13.
So he's like, probably romanticizing that time period.
Yeah, just a little bit before your age, I guess.
Yeah.
If he's the Donnie character. But it's fun setting. It's been beaten to death today. There's too much stuff set in the 80s. We're going to start getting 90s throwbacks. That's going to be weird.
I don't want to talk about it. But what I do like about this is that it doesn't feel like when I'm watching it, at no point am I like, oh, this is the 80s. It does feel very contemporary, and it's not like this romanticized, glamorized version of the 80s. It feels like what the 80s, I mean, we were very young in the 80s, but it felt like, it didn't feel like a whole other dimension, like it sometimes looks like on television.
Yeah, there's like no neon in this movie.
It's true.
In the director's cut, there is one brief scene where they're in a video arcade that kind of makes it feel a little bit more 80s. But I always forget that this movie is set in the 80s until I watch it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the side ponytails.
Side ponytails?
The side ponytails.
That was an 80s thing?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I've seen one of those in the wild ever.
Maybe you just weren't paying enough attention to girls when you were that age. You were pretty young in the 80s.
I would have been 4 years old, so I was I was still figuring myself out. I get a little family dinner scene with Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal and the family. So yeah, I think this is a part that works really well in the movie is the family dynamic, the performances. They all feel very believable, interacting with each other and their own personalities.
I really like this family. Because you rarely see teen angsty movies where the parents are present and supportive and loving and doing the best that they could possibly be doing for the child. And I think I can't offhand think of another movie that does that.
Yeah, there's some tension in the family because like Donnie has psychological issues of some kind. They don't nail it down too much. And his older sister is like taking a year off school and kind of fucking around and waiting to go back. So, you know, and Donnie's a little shitty with his mom. He calls her a bitch and, you know, but there's frustration and tension, but also a lot of love. And it's not, you know, like the parents are the worst people in the world or you only see them from like the legs down. They're not even in the movie, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think their interactions feel very, very natural and very real.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like Mary McDonald has a glass of wine in her hand in about 80% of the movie. Like she totally is like the original wine mom.
Yeah.
And looking good. Damn, Mary McDonald got it going on.
Beautiful woman.
Yeah.
She's bitching.
Yeah. So Donnie does some more sleepwalking. He wakes up one night. Someone says, "Hey, wake up." They don't say it like that. They say,
"Could be confused with the Mothman."
Totally,
according to film canon.
Yeah. And this is where things start to get creepy. He, walks to this golf course in the middle of the night, and there is a giant bunny with a creepy, messed up metal face and
fixed grin.
Sorry.
Fixed grin. the most
grin.
horrifying kind of face you can make.
And he's like, hey, the world's going to end, bro. So like at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, Donnie Darko. Great. This is awesome. But then it goes downhill from there. And then he wakes up and in the middle of the night, a jet engine falls on his house. Crazy.
Yeah, while he's out of the house, while he's sleeping on the...
Yeah, well, while he's out sleepwalking, which like, okay, I guess when you start to think about the plot of this, I don't understand why that is the case. But anyway.
There's so many theories about this moment of like the jet engine. There was even a shot of like before he leaves the home, the camera goes up and hits the chandelier or like it shows us the chandelier and then it drops back down and the door is closing clearly behind Donnie, but we don't see him actually leave the house until he's outside. And there are a lot of theories about like, I mean, we'll get into it later.
What does that mean?
What exact moment did things change or shift or break off or what does it mean? Yeah. What does it all mean? I jumped really hard when that jet engine hit the house in that moment. I was writing and my pen went flying.
Yeah, that looks pretty crazy and freaky. Mm-hmm. The dad runs up in slow motion. I mean, that's another like little visual bullshit thing where I'm like, that looks cool. I like that.
The books coming off the shelf.
Yeah. They go to school. We get a cool music video scene where they're at the school. Oh, before that, there is the scene where they're waiting for the bus and Donnie and his friends are being horribly racist to Charita.
Oh my God.
So like racism is bad. Don't be racist. I did like this part though, just because it felt very realistic to high school kids, just sort of being like shitty and mean. And I like the high school buddies and their kind of interactions throughout the movie. That's another part that felt very like believable is like, yeah, this is a bunch of like kind of shitty teenagers.
Super shitty. One thing about Charita I don't understand, and this is something that carries on through the entire film, is why she's so heavily featured in this story. I like her, but I don't know why we spend so much time with her. And later we find out she's like in love with Donnie, aren't we all? But
we would all react the way she did if Donnie were to touch our earmuffs.
Exactly. And he's a good guy. He tells his friends to shut up and leave her alone. But yeah, I'm always a little confused about her place in this story because she almost gives, there are a few characters who do this. I'll get more into that later, but a few characters who give these knowing looks and you're like, what do they know? But I don't think they really do know anything else.
Yeah. Like she's in a few scenes kind of getting bullied by the kids. Mm-hmm. She does her dance routine later on, which I actually liked. Right. I like that. I don't know. Like I don't know.
She's a soft contemporary dance piece. We know that from Singing in the Rain.
Yeah. And then she has her moment with Donnie. And there is a moment earlier where Donnie is talking to Noah Wiley, the teacher. And she's like outside the door, kind of like looking in, like, I don't know. It's strange.
And they're talking about time travel in that moment. So for a moment, you're like, wait, is she involved somehow? Does she know something?
Is she behind all of this?
Exactly.
So the kids go to school where Drew Barrymore is their teacher.
What the hell is up with this teacher?
This is all a little weird. So, okay, first off, I just want to say, is Drew Barrymore a bad actress? Because her character or performance in this movie felt a little weird to me. Like she's talking about the book about the stuff that gets smashed. And she's like, so what does the author mean when the kids say this or that? And just like that line and delivery just sounded so fake to me.
There's a lot of weird delivery by her in this. Her production company did pick this up. So that's probably why she is featured in this. I like Drew Barrymore, but I don't think that this was... I don't know what they were going for, but I agree with you. I was like, is this the best person for this role? Because the teacher, in the first place, is kind of a bitch to the kids. And then she's playing it quite a bit more sultry than I think a high school teacher maybe should be, presenting themselves. Like when Gretchen shows up and she's like, sit next to the boy who you think is the cutest. What?
You can't do that.
Man,
I mean, she gets fired.
Were a different
so.
time. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and also, okay, first of all, I'm going to put this out there to people who know. Noah Wyle to me will always be Mr. Hodinsky. Our teacher from middle school, he looks just like him, and he has the same kind of energy.
Totally.
He was our science teacher. We all love Mr. Hodinsky. Okay, anyway. Drew Barrymore and Noah Wyle in this, as the teachers, seem very suspect through this whole movie. Like, I was like, is there are they somehow involved in this? Because they give each other so many knowing looks. And then Noah Wyle's like carrying around Roberta Sparrow's book in his bag. Like, he's like, check out this book. Like, he just carries it with him everywhere he goes. And there's this one scene of them in the teacher's lounge, but nothing else is happening. It's just a shot of them and they're eating lunch and they look at each other and they're like, Donnie Darko?
Donnie Darko.
What?
Yeah, that made no sense. I rolled my eyes at that. That to me felt like the 23-year-old script writer. You know what I mean? If you can kind of imagine he is Donnie Darko and he's just like, yeah, I bet they're like, that Donnie Darko.
It came out of nowhere and it meant nothing unless they are somehow involved. I really hated their relationship with Donnie. I didn't hate Noah Wyle's character's relationship with him, but it just, his association with Drew Barrymore's character and all of
He's
that.
He's tainted by his association with the Drew Barrymore character.
It's true. It was also bizarre. That didn't make any sense to me. They could have not existed in this film, or she could have not.
Yeah, I think Noah Wyle's character serves a certain kind of like plot, exposition purpose, where he's like, oh, time travel. Well, sometimes these tubes come out of your chest or whatever. And but then, 10 minutes later, he's like, I can't talk about this anymore because I'll get fired because time travel is too spicy. I guess they were getting into God, so that kind of makes sense.
It looked like they were at a Catholic school as well. They all had uniforms on.
Yeah. I think he probably had a point there. There was a plot. There's a little bit of stuff in the director's cut that didn't make it into this one around Drew Barrymore's character. So there's a scene where there's like a PTA meeting where Kitty Farmer is like, these books are corrupting our children, which feels very contemporary.
Right.
And Drew Barrymore's character says she went out and bought all of the copies at a bookstore and is implying that the kids can go get those copies. Like, yeah, you can't get it here, but like you can get it there. And then they read Watership Down, which is a book about a bunny. And then there's another scene where they watch the movie in class, and then Donnie gets really angry about like, why should we care about the bunnies or whatever? Kind of pointless. Didn't really add anything to the story. However,
just more bunny stuff.
In the theatrical cut, there's a scene where Donnie is talking to her as she's like packing up her boxes and like leaving. It's that cellar door moment again. Mm-hmm. Why?
What does that offer? Yeah. Other than he does look at Roberta's like door, but Roberta doesn't live in a cellar. She has a house. But there was a cellar. I think that the door they see later, I think, is the cellar door, because I think the house is is down the way. Which also makes it seem like Drew Barrymore knows something, and she just writes cellar door on the chalkboard before she leaves. She's like, cellar door, Donnie. Bye. Yeah, it's anyway. Just a weird. I think it's just there because so that Donnie can go, oh, cellar door later on, and right. That's cool. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off. Don't worry, it's not. You didn't miss anything interesting. No, I was just gonna say that scene in the movie kind of doesn't make any sense, because the scene opens with Donnie alone in the classroom, sitting in a desk, talking to her, and she's like packing up her box, and you're like, wait, why is Donnie here? What the fuck? This doesn't make any sense. There is in the actual movie a lead up to that where there's people in the class and she's telling them she got fired, and then Donnie sticks around at the end. Anyway. Yeah, cellar door. That phrase, some friends of ours made a band and they named it Cellar Door because they, at least one of them was a big fan of this movie. I was wondering because I remembered that and I was like, was Jason a part of that band? But you weren't. I was not, no. Hindsight, mistake. That would have been fun. Yeah, so Gretchen shows up to class. I like that Drew Barrymore's teacher's like, Joni, get out. She makes that one girl change seats. She's such a bitch to that little one. So what do you think about Gretchen? So I really didn't like Jenna Malone when I was younger in this role. I feel like I didn't really like those characters who were like, I'm the weird cool girl. Like, I'm just like, I'm not impressed with anything. Like, I'm just cool and I'm just like dark and you wouldn't get it. I didn't really enjoy those kind of characters. So I didn't like this character much when I was younger. And I didn't really like Jenna Malone much when I was younger because I felt like she played those characters over and over again. And I was like, this isn't interesting to me. I feel like this is uncomfortable. However, as a grown woman, I see that she is playing a very real type of young woman. And I actually really appreciated this character's growth throughout the film and how she kind of opens up a little bit more near the end. I think there's a lot of really tragic sort of backstory for this character, and I'm not sure that all of that was necessary. I think it's maybe there to increase the connection and sort of make it move a little bit more rapidly between her and Donnie and them sort of sharing these darker things about themselves so that they form this connection or this bond quickly. But yeah, I really appreciated her in this viewing much more than I have in the past.
Interesting. I find that character feels like part of the wish fulfillment of the writer. Yeah. I think Jenna Malone does a fine job. I think the character's okay. Like, I don't think it's bad or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it does feel like she sort of exists to, you know, she's got problems. She's not a manic pixie dream girl, but she's like, you know, she's got things that make her sort of weird and outcast like Donnie. Mm-hmm. And they have that moment where like Donnie is walking her home and he's being perhaps a little on the spectrum with his knowledge of soap. And she's like, you're weird. And he's like, oh, and she's like, no, I meant that as a compliment. And like, that's the part where like, if you are a kid that age, you're like, yeah, I just want a girl to think my weirdness is cool.
Yeah, like when you're that age and you think you're the only person who's ever had feelings about anything.
Yeah.
No one will understand.
I'm slightly awkward.
I think in that sense of like really capturing what it is like to be young and feeling like an outcast and feeling uncomfortable and weird and wanting to find a way to be comfortable with that. I think that really nails it in that sense.
There was the scene where he was going to kiss her and she's like, no. And then he's like, why? And then it was something like, you know, she wants it to be at a time where it feels like the world is beautiful or something like that. Mm-hmm. I didn't get that. I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah. I also feel like that was a little inconsistent with sort of what we've seen with the character already. She's quite bold, I think, in many ways. I don't know. Maybe it's that backstory again.
Maybe there was something cut there that didn't make it in that director's cut. I don't know. Something about like that part just confused me. And yeah, so in terms of like also the wish fulfillment, I think like the wish fulfillment of this movie is Donnie gets to have a noble suicide at the end, you know,
right.
Like he does it to save his girlfriend. So that's kind of like just as a plot device where I feel she fits in. I think the performance is good enough and the character like mostly works, but I don't know. I just always see a little bit of like the writer kind of like, yeah, this cool girl who likes me.
Yeah. The cool girl who likes the weird guy. Yeah.
Patrick Swayze is a very cool guy and a very not cool guy as the sort of huckster self-help guru of the town. I love those videos that they made.
The controlling fear videos?
Yeah, the kid's like, I used to wet the bed. Not anymore. Yay.
I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, I also really enjoyed that. There was a woman in a woman featured in the video, and it underneath her name, it said Fear Survivor. There's a random horse neighing as well when it cuts to Patrick Swayze and on like a golf course or in a park or something. There's just a random horse noise.
Yeah, Kitty Farmer is the teacher. who's really into this, and I love her. She's watching it and just like loving it, you know.
Beth Graham, who you said you didn't know who Beth Graham was.
Right. Okay. So I was misunderstanding. I thought Kitty Farmer when I saw that name. I thought that was Roberta Sparrow's character. And I'd actually kind of forgotten about this character. And yeah, she's great. One of the best characters in the movie. Total sort of obsessed, narcissistic PTA mom. When she shows up at Mary McDonald's door later, and she's like, I'm beginning to question your commitment to sparkle motion.
And I also just said Beth Graham. It's Beth Grant. I mixed my names up. Oh, God.
Tears for Fears.
Start all over.
Tears of Fears. Jesus, I got the wrong name wrong. Deleting all of this.
Yeah, I forgot Seth Rogen was in this.
Yeah, he shows up and I was like, is that Seth Rogen? And then he goes, and I'm like, that's Seth Rogen.
And Alex Greenwald, who was the lead singer of Phantom Planet. Remember Phantom Planet?
That was...
California.
Okay. Was that Jason Schwartzman's band?
Yes.
I didn't...
Wait, was Jason Schwartzman in the band, or was his brother in the band?
Let me fire up the Google.
Schwartzman was in the band.
I thought it was him. I thought it was
Maybe
that guy.
it was. This is 4,000 years ago. I cannot recall.
Past members, Jason Schwartzman, who,
okay, yeah.
let's take a little trip down trivia lane here. Well out of his teens, Vince Vaughn reportedly turned down the part of Donnie due to his age. Mark Wahlberg was interested in the part, but apparently was only willing to play the part with a lisp. Jason Schwartzman was strongly considered for Donnie, but dropped out due to scheduling conflicts.
I can see Jason Schwartzman more than the others, but I also think he might have been like... Jason Schwartzman is so quirky. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is the perfect Donnie Darko because he rides that line between being a like sweet suburban kind of boy trying to figure out his place in the world and being like a very dark, unsettling young man at the same time. And he, for me, there's no point in this movie where I'm like, shut up, Donnie. Like, I feel like I'm completely on his side the entire film. And I don't know that. Certainly not with Mark Wahlberg or Vince Vaughn. I cannot even imagine what this movie would have been.
The Mark Wahlberg one would have been good. Things wouldn't have gone down that way, I can tell you. So Donnie sleepwalks again, and he trashes the school in the middle of the night. He's got an axe, and he fucks all them pipes up, and there's water everywhere. The scene the next day where the kids are talking about it, and they're like, there was feces everywhere. What are feces? Baby mice. Aw. That line, I will never forget that.
So good. I love the like weird 80s effects that Donnie's dream has. It's just like a quick flash and then it's gone and he wakes up and he's like got the axe on his shoulder with Frank behind him. I love that moment. It's so quick and it's so strange and it's perfect 80s weird digital nightmare.
Donnie goes to... Go ahead.
We've got to, when we get to the end, we've got to revisit the They Made Me Do It font that is on the school sidewalk. Frank's font, let's call it.
That's what in MS Word, there's one called Frank. So a recurring theme in this movie is Donnie goes to therapy. We got a couple scenes like this, and there is a nice therapist lady who talks to him, and he explains the new friend he made and all these things that are happening in the time travel. Yeah, what'd you think of that?
I really like this relationship between him and his therapist. I like the moment, like when we first meet them, and he's like, "I made a new friend, real or imaginary? Imaginary." Like the lines are just stacked so tightly on top of one another that you can tell that this is a good device to sort of really let us delve into what's actually going on with Donnie. And I, again, appreciate that this is a genuinely supportive, loving, concerned character, the doctor, rather than somebody working against Donnie. Like, other than maybe the bullies at school, there's really nobody that is a force that's really working against Donnie in this. And I find that really interesting. And I like that this was another supportive relationship that again, she's doing presumably everything that she can to help him, and it's not working. But I like these two together. I love all of the moments of hypnosis as well. I think Jake Gyllenhaal plays this really well. He's like a little child in these moments, really kind of heartbreaking and kind of like pervy sometimes.
Yeah, so, you know, she's like asking him questions and he starts getting on about girls and then starts sticking his hand down his pants. So I haven't had my wisdom teeth taken out yet, and I'm scared to do it because I've seen those videos of what happens to people when they're on whatever fucking drug they give you at the dentist. And like, I just know it's going to turn into something like that. So no, thank you.
You've never been under anesthetic before?
I've had surgery, but like... I woke up and I wasn't like completely out of it. I was the dentist stuff. They got something there that makes you a little wacky.
I've been drugged up for procedures before, and I have definitely been wacky. You know, like thinking I'm whispering to my friend, but really yelling across the room, "That nurse is a real bitch!"
I can't control the volume of my voice.
Exactly. It's fun. You should just go do it. You might learn something about yourself.
Recreational anesthetic.
I like that they contrast that moment where he's in that hypnotist. Well, she's not a hypnotist. She's a doctor, where he's in her office and they have that moment and she wakes him up just before he, you know, really fully gets his hand where he wants it to go. And then it's his friends talking about girls and the conversation goes into Smurfs.
Right.
It's an interesting contrast. Interesting choice to put
How
those back to
does
back.
the Society of Smurfs work with respect to femaleness? Apparently, they had to get permission to talk about that, and they got like sign off from the Smurf people because I think like Donnie Darko's actual assessment of like they're all sexless, nobody's fucking was correct.
I love it. He's like a little drunk or something. This is also illogical, you know, about being a Smurf. It's so matter of fact.
Yeah, he's almost frustrated with him. He's like, you guys don't get it. I think this movie really does have like the different personalities of Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor in it pretty well. Like, because it has that like sort of like childlike, Zodiac Robert Graysmith, Jake Gyllenhaal, but then there's kind of like a creepy, more menacing or angry like Prisoners or Nightcrawler Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people saw this movie and were like, that guy is gonna go somewhere. That's what I thought when I saw it, and I was right.
Yeah, it's really layered, his performance. I mean, I think that, you know, as much as I joke, like I fell in love with him in this movie, I think I don't think he's underrated as an actor, but I think he like what he really truly does and the nuance he brings to every performance he gives is really underappreciated maybe by like, you know, people who aren't necessarily looking for those little things that he's doing. I think he's brilliant.
So there's a woman named Roberta Sparrow. She's a character in this movie. I don't think she's a particularly well-developed character. I kind of associate her with all the bad stuff about this movie, which is the time travel bullshit. So you see her a couple times. She has this habit of walking back and forth to her mailbox. The kids make fun of her for it. That was like a scene where the kids were cruel that I thought was great because I was like, yeah, that's what I was like at that age. And Donnie gets a time travel book that is sort of explaining stuff because now he's starting to see stuff. He's sitting on the couch and he sees these if you've ever seen the movie The Abyss, it actually looks a lot like that. These like CGI time noodles popping out of people's chests, which writer and director Richard Kelly came up with the idea for the future blobs while watching football. John Madden was using a telestrator, which is one of those things where you can like draw arrows on the screen, like lines. Right. And he watched this while high and started to think about what would happen if hypothetically if humans were doing that. So again, 23-year-old guy watching football high. Now it's part of the movie.
I've got to say, I know that we're talking about how we're not sure if the effects will hold up in this movie, and they held up better than I thought they would. There was like a beckoning finger at one point, which was so cheesy and didn't need to happen, but otherwise it wasn't as bad as I was anticipating.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of effects, like, there's not really a ton. There's probably the one that looks like cost the most money was that jet engine falling through the house. I don't know if that was made to scale or if they made a smaller model or what. Yeah, there's that. There's some CGI, but I think the CGI is all pretty like tasteful in how much it's used. It's sort of a lot of like, Donnie's like tapping this invisible layer of time travel, a liquid water goo effect. And then probably the most ambitious effect is the time travel chess noodles, which look okay. I mean, it looks like 2000 CGI, but like I'm not going to hold that against the movie, except for the part where the finger where it turns into a hand and goes, "Come here."
Ugh,
and it's like,
so stupid.
Why? But then he finds a gun and you're like, "Oh God," like that looks real creepy.
This movie does a great job of like building up to like, as it goes on, you're really more and more, I think as now someone who could be the mother of someone Donnie's age, I'm legitimately so concerned for this child's well-being. I'm like, wow, he's becoming more and more unhinged and is getting himself into increasingly dangerous situations for not only himself but everyone around him. And that sort of like childless mother in me was very stressed out watching it this time. Whereas maybe when I was younger, I was just like, this guy's hot. Now I was like, oh God, baby boy, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, like the parents are kind of going through something kind of rough, which is like their kid has severe mental health issues and wakes up in random places, and they didn't know he found the gun, but like that's not good.
Yeah, I don't think he just found the gun. I think Donnie knew where that gun was, and he went to go retrieve the gun.
No, the noodle told him where the gun was. He had to follow the noodle. We get a scene where Donnie tells off Jim Cunningham, the guru guy. Again, this is wish fulfillment. The sort of like, you're full of shit and I know everything. It reminds me of the opening scene in that TV show, The Newsroom, that came out probably like 10 years ago at this point. It's the worst opening scene in history. I hate it so much because it's basically like there's like, he's a television man and there's like a liberal on one side and a conservative on the other side, and they're fighting and saying things. And then a girl in the crowd asks like, why is America the best country in the world? And then he gives this like real talk speech that's like, we're number this and that and blah, blah, blah. It's so stupid. It's just like, Aaron Sorkin wrote it, is what I'm getting at. Okay. So this kind of felt a little bit like an Aaron Sorkin moment, much more bearable. And it was, it was a funny scene, but I definitely felt the like wish fulfillment aspect of it.
I love this. This movie does throw in some great little side characters, or like not even side characters, just moments from people who happen to be in the same space. Like I love they have other students talking about things that they're concerned about. And then one goes, my stepsister, sometimes I worry she eats too much. Shut up, Kim.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it's a great scene. And like this stuff is interesting because like later on in the movie, Donnie sets this guy's house on fire, and it turns out, oops, he has a lot of child porn, and it seems to be involved in the business. Which is kind of interesting, I guess, because like this character in that plot line kind of ultimately doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
But it does add a lot of flavor, I guess. Like that character and the scenes where they're in school and they're like watching the videos and doing the exercises and all that kind of stuff.
Where's fear and where's love and good versus bad?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What class is that, by the way? What the fuck class do you learn the fear-love spectrum? Is this like a calm class, like a career and life management type of situation?
Yeah, I don't know. And like the school is probably paying a lot of money to like license that course, which is funny.
Yeah, it feels like this teacher is really just recruiting for a cult.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate to how these programs often work. It is a good little depiction of like kind of like a multi-level marketing, culty, health guru stuff.
Yeah.
What did you think of those dream vision goggles? That was a weird scene. I completely forgot about.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. It felt like very real in the sense of like, remember stupid fucking assignments like create a whatever, totally unlike anything you'll ever have to think about in your entire life unless you happen to have one very specific job. it was kind of weird, and I don't know what purpose it served at all. And Noah Wyle got kind of sassy with them. Did you ever think, perhaps, that children need darkness to, develop? And I was like, what's the point? And he very, it was very pronounced, his unwrapping of a little candy and him chewing on the candy.
So trivia fact, Noah Wyle did that because he decided his character is diabetic.
Wow. Interesting.
Full method.
I mean, other than the bullies really take a swing at his girlfriend and just traumatize her even more. But again, I'm not sure what point that storyline had or what purpose it served.
So the bullies were really mean in that scene, but I definitely remember and love the
oh my God.
knife sounding or knife stabbing sound he makes. That still cracks me up, even though it's...
As a bully, he's really funny because he's so like what a middle school or, young high school bully is. Just a little, you hate him so much. He's such a shit.
He's got his kind of mullet thing going on.
Kind of mullet thing. I think that's full mullet.
It was like, okay, that Mr. Houdinski, that he had kind of Mr. Houdinski's hair. You take him and you combine him with Noah Wyle.
Oh my God.
Now we're cooking with fire. So they go to a movie and Frank shows up and is like, yo, check out this hole I made in the movie screen. Also, I'm a dude. I'm not actually...
I don't remember this reveal at all.
No?
At all. I was like, at first when he took his headpiece, what do you call it?
A mask.
Hat? His mask. When he took that bunny head off, I thought it was a woman. I was like, wait, is Frank a woman? And there was just a man with beautiful hair. I don't remember that. I do remember that line, though, of why are you wearing that stupid bunny suit? And then why are you wearing that stupid man suit? And that feels so like something a young person would say to sound.
It sounds
like
clever, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the scene because that's always a moment that kind of disappoints me, is realizing that Frank is not like a supernatural being, but he's like a dude, And you find out later he's just like another high school kid or a little older.
Yeah, according to some internet sources, he's supposed to be Donnie's sister's boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
At the party, she's like, has anyone seen Frank? That doesn't really tell us that's her boyfriend, though.
The way she said it.
She's that good.
Yeah. There's the sparkle motion dance sequence that kind of goes on as they're like in the movie theater, and Donnie's like burning that guy's house down. This feels borderline criminal. I think it's kind of funny that Katie Farmer is this like conservative, think about the children, family values, and then you have like, this reminds me of like the 2000s and the era of like child pageants and all that shit.
Yep. 100%. And I think it's interesting that it's cut with him burning down Cunningham's home, which is then child pornography is found in his home.
Ah, yeah.
Wow.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lesson there. There's a scene earlier in the movie where they're at school and like those kids, the sparkle motion kids, are all kind of like doing their shit together. And I had this horrible feeling because I'm like, oh God, they're just Instagram influencers. Like that's 100% what they would be today.
Yes.
They would be doing the same shit, just with cameras pointed at themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you find out that dude's a pedophile. Whoops. Drew Barrymore gets fired and writes cellar door on the chalkboard. Okay.
Screams fuck in front of Charita outside.
Yeah.
Seems like could be a meaningful moment between the two of them, but do we care? Is this their story?
I don't know. Not really.
Yeah.
Donnie touches Charita's earmuffs. Again, that was a scene that just kind of... I mean, maybe at this point in the movie, Donnie's sort of like in this weird headspace where he knows like, I kind of feel like he knows some crazy. He knows this is the end of the world. That's going to happen.
Right.
So maybe he's kind of like just at peace and open with people.
Maybe. And she's like, does the thing like when you have a crush on someone, but you don't want them to know, because the worst thing could be that someone you have a crush on finds out you have a crush on them, and she freaks the fuck out and drops her Donnie Darko scribbler.
And Donnie walks home with the earmuffs on.
Loved it.
Then there's a cool, huge party because Maggie Gyllenhaal is going to Harvard.
Wait, before this though, he goes to have his final therapy session that we see when he has that really intense moment when he sees Frank.
Right, yeah.
That's, I think, right before this, which I think is worth talking about, only because it gets so intense. And like, he ends up hugging his therapist, and she's like, I think this is the moment where she calls the house, but the parents are gone when they have the house party. And she's like,
we need to talk.
Yeah. Cause he's basically like, Frank's telling me this is all going to end. And I can see, and then he's like, I can see him right now, which is like the first time he's really interacting with Frank in front of somebody else other than his sister going, who are you talking to, when he's in the bathroom?
Yeah. And that scene was like freaky. Like when he's like, he's in here with me. I was like, ah. I leapt out of my seat.
Yeah, it was so heartbreaking as well. Heartbreaking and horrifying at the same time. Good job, Jake. And I don't know the actor's name who played the doctor, but she was fantastic. Yeah,
she looks like someone who I'm guessing was like famous 10 years before the movie was made, if that makes any sense what I'm saying there.
She looked 100% like she was just actually plucked out of the actual 80s and put into this film.
Patrick Swayze brought his own clothes for this movie, for his 80s garb.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. Now, did he bring his own child pornography? That's the real question.
Oh, no. He can't even defend himself. R.I.P. Patrick Swayze. We love Patrick Swayze. We just don't love Mr. Cunningham.
We don't like his character in this movie. Yeah, no. Patrick Swayze, cool guy. We should
bold choice for him to play such a character, actually.
Yeah. So then there's the party, kind of the end of the movie when things get real ridiculous. So Gretchen shows up and she's like, my mom ran away or something happened.
Again, what does this matter to the story?
Well, it matters because then Donnie gets to comfort her and they get close and make out and maybe have sex. I don't know. And
they actually make out.
They do.
Not like in Memento.
I was not imagining it this time. Yeah. And then...
Well, and we get the reveal, hey, has anyone seen Frank? And you're like, wait, who's... Because we hear Frank's name a few times in a few different scenarios. And Jake Gyllenhaal is like, Donnie is like, what? And then we hear his sister say, has anyone seen Frank? And it's sort of like at that point where you're like, oh, Frank is a real person that they know, but you still don't know who he is. And then there's someone said he went to get beer. This is something that doesn't make sense to me. They're one of many things, but on their little whiteboard on the fridge, which has been highlighted in a few scenes previously.
Vote Dukakis.
The writing said, Frank was here, went to get beer. It was in Frank font. Clearly, Frank, the actual Frank, Maggie Gyllenhaal's boyfriend, possibly, wrote this. Did Donnie exactly somehow figure this out? Did he create an actual font, stencil it into the ground at the school? Like, why does the writing in the school they made me do it look exactly like Frank's actual writing? And if I saw somebody writing with that kind of penmanship, I would probably suggest they get assessed by a neurologist because it does not look... it doesn't look okay. It looks like there's some sort of neurological thing happening.
Frank later went on to draw the logo for the band Korn.
He did all of the font type for 24-hour party people. They were like, we need this.
I don't I guess I would say that maybe he's just possessed by the power of Frank. I don't know. Frank isn't possessing him, but like his supernatural guidance. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I thought I would, I was just like, it kind of pissed me off. I was like, this doesn't make sense.
It's dumb. So then they just decide we got to go to Roberta Sparrow's house right now.
Because the world's going to end.
My noodle is telling me to go there. And then they go there, and then the bullies, I guess, are breaking into the place to steal stuff.
What, like, does she have treasure? What is the myth? What is the lore of Roberta Sparrow? Is that something in the director's cut we don't see?
Actually, no, that is in the theatrical cut. The mom does explain when they're at the dinner table and Donnie's talking about the book. She says, "Oh, that woman." She's like, "I don't like that name, Grandma Death." But she says like she lives there all alone and apparently has a ton of money. So it is established that she is very wealthy as a former nun or school teacher.
You know how much money those.
It was the go-go 80s. The economy was different then.
Well, maybe she's from old money.
Who knows? Yeah. I don't know. Those guys are there, I guess, stealing stuff. I don't know why they're there. Like, this is where it really is just like goofy writing.
I guess they're there so that Gretchen can be knocked over so that she can be run over.
Yeah, she has to be on the ground so that when Frank shows up and swerves, he runs her over.
Yeah.
And then
swerves out of the way so he doesn't hit Roberta Sparrow.
That's right.
I thought Roberta Sparrow was the one who was hit in this, and I was like, I actually went when poor little Gretchen's body got run over, and I thought Roberta Sparrow had a much larger part in this movie. Like rewatching it, I was like, she like we see a few of her hair blowing in the wind a few times, and other than that, she's really nothing. Oh, she tells Donnie like we all die alone or whatever she says.
Right. Yeah.
But otherwise, come on. So much of this movie just feels unfinished or underdeveloped. That's a better word. Underdeveloped.
So in the director's cut, Gretchen gets run over. Frank is like, "What'd you do?" And Donnie just pulls out a gun and just blasts him in the face. In the director's cut, Roberta Sparrow immediately whispers into Donnie's ear, "A storm is coming. You must hurry."
Oh, sort of Take Shelter style.
Yeah, I think
kind of a similar vibe to that movie.
Yeah, actually, the giant stuff around the house kind of looks like that, huh? I haven't seen that in a while.
Kind of is stuff happening, or is this man schizophrenic?
Yeah. I mean, I think in this movie, it is established that whatever is happening is actually happening.
Yeah.
We just don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
So Donnie...
And, well, you forgot to mention, people know this, but I do like how he gets shot in the eye, and when he does show up in the movie theater, his eye's all fucked up. And Donnie goes, "What happened to your eye?" And then we later find out what it is. I like that. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's kind of cool.
It makes enough sense. There is an earlier scene where he's like hallucinating talking to Frank, and he's like got a knife or something, and he's like stabbing his eye.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I like that scene. I thought that looked really cool.
It looks really creepy, and when the younger sister walks in, I can't remember if it's that time or another time, but the part where she does walk in, she's like, "Who are you talking to?" And he just like snaps out of it, and he's like, "No one.
Just taking my meds.
Fine, everything's fine." So Donnie, this I just do not understand how this works. So basically, Donnie takes Gretchen to the mountain.
God, her dead body to the mountain.
Yeah.
And like straps her into the passenger seat. Like doesn't lay her body in the back seat and cover it with a blanket. He just like straps a dead body into the passenger seat in the front seat of the car.
Well,
Donnie.
Okay. Hold on. One, I don't know where seatbelt laws were in the 80s, but you're asking for trouble if you got a passenger without a seatbelt. So strap them in. And two, someone in the back seat without a seatbelt can become a projectile. We learned that in Calm, in the love, fear. Not wearing your seatbelt is a product of fear. Not putting a seatbelt on your dead girlfriend's body, that's fear right there.
You make a great point, Jason.
I should have been a lawyer. So they go to the mountain and the clouds are just going nuts. Some kind of tornado thing happening. And then Donnie time travels back in time. And he's in his bed and he's laughing it up.
How?
Yeah, we didn't see a scene of like him going down like a warp pipe like in Super Mario or something, and boop, boop, it goes back in time. I don't know.
And why does he take Gretchen to the top of the mountain?
Well, I guess it kind of doesn't. I interpret it as like he needs to go there to go back in time. And what else are you going to do?
Well, because at the beginning of the film, he's there. Is he just repeating this cycle?
No, I don't think so.
Is this like a Groundhog Day time travel combo situation?
All right, we should maybe get into the director's cut stuff because this kind of directly addresses that. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to talk about Mad World at all before we get into the director's cut?
Okay,
that'll
yeah.
come later.
You know what? Yeah, let's talk about that first. Let us talk about that scene. So Donnie goes back in time, and then the jet engine falls in the house. And then we just get a bunch of shots of all these sort of random supporting characters feeling really sad for some reason.
Yeah.
As Mad World plays.
Mad World cover by Gary Jules, which Michael Andrews, who did the score, played piano on that track, which was interesting. Little tidbit. How do you feel about this version of Mad World, Jason? So
this was the first version of that song I'd heard. Ironically, when I first saw this movie, I did not like 80s music at all. When I was a kid, I hated the sound of 80s music. Synthesizers. I think I have this distinct memory of being in a mall in Manitoba as a very unhappy child, and Take My Breath Away by Berlin from the Top Gun soundtrack was playing. And that song has a very distinctive synthesizer sound to it that just sounds very like warbly and weird. Anyway, I think that just made me sort of hate that whole era of music for a long time. And even when I first watched this movie, I wasn't like into the music at all. Now I love it. I'm like, oh shit, Joy Division, great. So I had never actually heard that version before, and I really like this song. I think it's a great cover. I do think it's a nice song. Sounds good. My problems with it are mostly that it got really popular and just sort of showed up in a bunch of places, and I was sort of tired of it at that point. And in this scene in the movie, I mean, this really is the wish for a noble suicide song kind of fitting with that, I guess. I don't think that's what the song is actually about. I don't even know, but it just sort of like works with that. It works well at conveying what I think the director was going for, but I also think it's a bit silly.
Yeah. I like this cover. I don't know. That's all
the
I
song.
gotta
I
say
think.
about
I think the song is good. Like it's a good song, good cover. Nothing wrong with that. Most of my complaints are all like a layer removed from just listening to the song on its own.
Yeah. I like the way I think it's just in terms of the mood it's conveying is really effective. I love that last moment between Mom and Gretchen. It's an odd moment, and you're almost like, oh, is there some sort of recognition there? Or, I mean, Gretchen is alive and will stay alive because her mom's son died nobly. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting connection. And also she, Gretchen doesn't really have a family. Her mom's, who knows what her mom is doing at this point. And now, Mom has lost her son. I like the little wave, and I love the little boy wave to close. It's so absurd.
Hey,
bye. Yeah. I think it's a nice way to wrap it up. I mean, I think that they could have gone a number of different ways in terms of how they wrapped this film up. I think it's tricky with any sort of time travel-y film to say, okay, here's a nice little bow. But they put a nice little bow on it, I think. It was devastating at the end. I did shed a tear. I got emotional.
It is like Richard Kelly did a really good job directing this movie, and it is very effective at conveying feelings and making you feel those feelings. And I think the song does that really well. I just roll my eyes at it kind of the more I've seen the movie, and my feelings of it as a whole, I'm like, all right. But it does what it's doing really well. And you know, when you're seeing the whole family outside crying, like Maggie Gyllenhaal just like looks destroyed. Very good visual representation of grief there in that brief moment. And Mary McDonnell just like blasting a cig. Yeah. So, okay, with respect to the director's cut, I want to get into some stuff that is specific to the details of the time travel stuff, because there is a bunch of that. But just some general things about it. There's a couple extended scenes and added scenes. Most of them are pretty inconsequential. There's another scene where Donnie is talking to his dad. Also, okay, I read this. The director's cut alters the pacing of the film, adds deleted scenes, new visual effects, blah, blah, blah. Richard Kelly regards this version not as a director's cut. The title was the publisher's idea. He considers the theatrical version just fine on its own right. Instead, to him, this version is a special edition of sorts. So I guess that is a bit more accurate. I didn't know that until I watched that version and wrote all these notes. I'm going to tell you about it anyway. It's less profound that it's... Because I thought a director's cut, like maybe this is going to fix some of what I think are the problems with the movie. It definitely does not.
Okay.
So added scenes, most of them are kind of not too interesting. They added some visual effects. So a couple times, the scenes where Donnie sees Frank, and the way they're shown in the movie is like he'll see him and you might get some like visual imagery of like the sky or something like that. They do this weird thing where they have like a close-up of an eye, like a massive close-up of like just an eye.
Right.
And throughout the movie, that image shows up more and more and more. And towards the end, so in the theatrical cut, Donnie goes up to the mountain and then he goes back in time. And the way they represent this is they just play like a ton of scenes from the movie in reverse in fast forward, which actually like kind of works. Like I actually find that weird reversal kind of a little bit touching for some strange reason. Like it's sort of
Didn't like the voiceover. I got to say that.
Oh, on the airplane of like, well, you need metal and water.
And then there was a moment with Gretchen, I think. And it was sort of like... That was sort of a part of that whole sequence almost. Trust your audience. Come on. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay. So in this version, all of that stuff is happening, but you're also seeing with it the eye superimposed. And they have this effect that looks like in the Terminator movies. When you see from the Terminator's perspective, it's kind of like a CRT TV filter on it. And there's like scan lines and stuff like that. It literally looks like that.
What?
Plus they're showing visuals of like different scenes in the movie. Not just the reversing stuff, but like images from parts of the movie. It's so busy and obnoxious and pointless. I'm like, what is going on here? Yeah, not an improvement. Makes things worse. Weird. Completely pointless. The other big thing is throughout the movie, there are basically, they look like video game cut screens where like, or like a loading screen where for just like, 10 seconds, you'll see some text. And there's superimposed passages from Roberta Sparrow's book that kind of, I think, are explaining what's happening. So let me read these to you.
Okay.
If a tangent universe occurs, it will be highly unstable, sustaining life for no more than a few weeks. So I think we are seeing a tangent universe.
Right.
Water and metal are the key elements of time travel. Basically what Noah Wiley was saying. You got a metal thing, a craft, yeah, like an airplane. The manipulated living, and those words are capitalized, will do anything to save themselves from oblivion.
Repeat that? The manipulated living
will do anything to save themselves from oblivion.
Who's the manipulated living then in this story?
I don't think it's Donnie, because there are some other kind of like titular characters that they name here. Artifacts provide the first sign that a tangent universe has occurred. And when you see that text, it also shows footage of the jet engine being removed from the house.
Okay.
So that is a artifact from a tangent universe. The living receiver, capitalized, is often blessed with fourth dimensional powers. These include increased strength, telekinesis, mind control, and the ability to conjure fire and water.
Okay.
That might be Frank? Telekinesis, mind control. Maybe you could get someone to write in a certain font.
He's conjuring fire and water through Donnie.
The manipulated dead will set an insurance trap, and that's spelled insurance as ENSURANCE. The living receiver must ensure the fate of all mankind.
No pressure.
I don't know what that means. When the manipulated awaken from their journey into the tangent universe, they are often haunted by the experience in their dreams. Many of them will not remember. Those who do remember the journey are often overcome with profound remorse for the regretful actions buried within there, and then it kind of trails off.
So would that not be Donnie in that situation?
So it says the manipulated. It doesn't say who or what.
Who?
So I think that's referring to the scene where Mad World is playing and everyone is sad. I think those are the people that were in the tangent universe, and that universe now got undone, and they're kind of like having some emotional fallout from it.
Because they're existing in the original, but with some sort of like emotional residue.
Yeah.
Does this explain to us why Donnie's laughing hysterically before the jet engine plops down onto his head?
No. I think
maybe he's just so full of glee and joy that he's done it.
Maybe. So here's the thing.
That must be kind of a high.
I don't understand. So that's it for all the quotes. I think they look ridiculous in the movie. Like it really does look like a video game loading screen. I was like, this is awful. I don't understand if Donnie actually did anything. Like, so the jet engine comes from one universe and then lands in his house, but he's not there to die. And then a bunch of stuff happens, a bunch of plot happens, a bunch of bad things happen.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe he does something to send himself back in time where he's supposed to be, but we don't see that part. And I guess by doing that, it undoes all the other bad stuff.
Well, because it's October 2nd when he goes back,
obviously,
to the original day. So that stuff wouldn't have happened in this other timeline that he's in. Nothing's happened yet.
So like literally kind of nothing happened anyway.
So he's fixing a problem that doesn't even exist.
I guess the question is, and maybe they do kind of get into this in the movie, did Donnie have a choice to not go back in time? Could he have been like, sorry, Gretchen, shit happens, and I'm gonna keep living my life?
Yeah.
Because like we don't see him get in some kind of wormhole to go back in time, you know? They kind of imply that he does something to get there.
Yeah. And what is the moment? I want to know, what is the moment where he split into this other timeline? Was it the moment the engine dropped?
I think it is, yeah, because that's the moment he goes back to.
Yeah.
But the jet engine comes from the other dimension. You know what I mean? Like the jet engine exists because all that other stuff happens. I mean, I guess maybe in that timeline.
But so then if time isn't linear, then is he just constantly reliving this?
I don't know, because when he dies from the jet engine, maybe the sparkle motion field trip gets canceled, so they're not on that airplane flying. I guess the flight would have happened either way.
But then doesn't he need to go into the other universe and make everything else happen in order to come back to die?
This movie is bullshit, okay? Like,
there was just another point I had in my brain too that it's already gone. Like this, it's just like my brain is spiraling.
This is my problem with Donnie Darko. Overall is I don't care about this. I don't want to have to think about this.
Yeah.
I'm as long as I don't try and understand it, it doesn't bother me too much in the movie. Like I'm not someone who just is like, I have to understand all the details to appreciate something.
Right.
But I think the movie kind of does want you to think about this stuff. And I think like Richard Kelly, the genesis of the idea was, I guess it came from hearing stories about icicles falling off of airplanes and like landing on someone or like landing on someone's house. And then he's like, what if a jet engine fell on someone's house? And like that kind of kickstarted the script, which is bizarre because it's the least interesting thing about this movie. Like, I just think all of the time travel stuff kind of just falls flat. I just sort of don't care. I don't, if it was executed a little bit better, then maybe it wouldn't bother me so much, but like, I just don't want to have to make myself understand it. I think had it stayed more creepy, like, it's just a letdown. I don't know. Like, when you first see Frank, you're like, what the fuck is that? And it's just like, everything is nuts. And then as it goes on, you're like, oh, okay, it's a high school kid and it was some time travel mishap. Who cares?
Yeah, I would have preferred more, like, if we're going down that time travel lane, you know what I would have wanted. I should stop comparing it to Memento, but you know, the Memento special edition has got like Leonard's files in it. I want to read Roberta's book, or I want to read selections from Roberta's book. You know what I mean? Like, make this an experience, because I feel like that's what it is. Because ultimately, the more we're talking about it, I'm like, what the fuck is this movie trying to say? Other than me questioning what the fuck is time travel and what does that mean? I don't really know what this movie is trying to say. Because Donnie if we're supposed to believe this movie, then do we believe that Donnie is not mentally ill necessarily, that he's actually experiencing these things? His family is incredibly supportive. His therapist is supportive. He's loved by the weirdo. The two weirdos fall in love. I don't know. I don't really know what is this saying at the end of the day.
I think it's saying, I'm 23 years old. I just got out of film school. I have this cool idea. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking for more of like Roberto Sparrow's book. I think that is, the DVD has stuff like that. And I think maybe the stuff that was on the DVD, that might be what they actually just stuck into this director's cut. But I mean, that director's cut is giving you more of that. And I was just like resentful that I had to like try and understand it. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, I do have an issue with, if you're going to present time travel to me, you need to make it make sense.
It has to make enough sense, like.
Yeah. I have to be able to follow it and be like, okay, I see what they were going for, or I can connect enough dots that it forms at least somewhat of a picture for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty willing to be forgiving in time travel movies, so long as it's executed well enough. You know what I mean? Like, even if it kind of doesn't make sense, if it just sort of like commits to it and it's like, it just works like that in this movie, don't worry about it.
Yes, that's exactly it though. Like, if you're explaining how it works in this movie and that makes sense, like, I don't need it to be like scientifically accurate, like as if I fucking know. But to me, there's too many loose ends that like, how the fuck and how does that work? And that doesn't make sense. And I'm just spiraling.
Yeah, I think it's better if, like, the fact that they try and explain it in all this additional context, I think makes it worse. Like, I don't think it helps. I'm just like, so I'll give the theatrical cut that for at least just sort of like, look, it doesn't make sense, but like, it makes enough sense. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this was fine. I didn't hate this movie, but it definitely doesn't hold up in the way, I was hoping it would. I was a bit disappointed. Oh, actually, a bit of trivia that I thought was interesting. This was released after 9/11 and was not promoted much because of the themes in this movie, obviously. And so that's why it didn't do very well at the box office, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't even connect the dots there until I read it.
Yeah, that would have been pretty bad timing. Things were definitely pretty touchy around then with like movies and music and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They also, the font that appears in the movie when it shows you the date is vaguely Arabic looking, I believe was the term. And they changed that for the posters. They kept it in the movie though.
Right. Also, interesting fact, apparently there is a stage play. There is an stage adaptation. So I'll be right back. I'm going to go direct that right now. See if we can make sense of it.
I'm actually interested to see, one, do they have a character who plays the jet engine and gets lowered from a rope onto the Donnie Darko character? But I'm actually interested to see what their approach is. Like, maybe do they clean this thing up? Do they kind of...
Maybe it's Roberta. Maybe it's Roberta's backstory. That's what I want a movie about. Roberta and that rockin' gray mullet. talking about time travel.
Yeah, Donnie Darko. I don't know. I felt like I'm being a little bit too harsh on this movie, but I always start off like it's the same thing every time. You know, I start watching it, I get real excited when the Killing Moon starts playing, and then half an hour in, I'm like, right, Donnie Darko, things kind of start to go downhill. Also, by going back in time, Donnie undoes the pedophile getting caught. So he's just going to continue being a pedophile.
I thought about that when I saw Patrick Swayze crying.
Yeah, he's crying in bed and he's like, whew. Whew, that was close.
Yeah, that was upsetting.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, it does some stuff so well, you know, like that's why I get frustrated with this movie is like, if it was just a bad movie about time travel, I wouldn't give a shit. But like the stuff that it has going for it is so good, you know, like the amazing soundtrack, the score, there's moments where it's like doing that. It's just like weird mechanical synthesizer sounds, very creepy. I think it's got a great cast. I think I think Jake Gyllenhaal does a great job as the lead, but like all of the supporting characters feel real and natural and I believe them. And the dialogue is good for the most part, other than some clunky moments, but I think a lot of that stuff works really well. And it just like sets things up so well. You know, it's just like really got so much going for it. And then it just, I don't know, it just kind of falls flat and I get frustrated.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a movie for teenagers, really, at the end of the day. Like, I'll probably watch it again several times, hopefully, you know, knock on wood, I live a long life. But am I as excited about it as I used to be? Definitely not. It is a bit of a disappointment. There's less to connect to as an adult, but I think that those nostalgic feelings would make up for it if it weren't for the frustrations of the plot. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I'm going to give this 7.5 cellar doors for nostalgia's sake.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. This is 7.5 baby mice for me. Folks, if you haven't seen Donnie Darko, why did you listen to this? But, you know, check it out. If you know anybody who hasn't seen it, it's a good enough movie. It's worth watching. I think it is kind of a sort of a classic of that era, the late 90s, early 2000s.
I think it's a really iconic piece of film as well. Like for what it was doing at the time and how it made young people feel, I think was really exciting. It's on a lot of top 100 movie lists and things like that. Like I do think it presented something a bit unique and unusual. I mean, there really still, to me, there's not a lot that is like this movie. It had its very own distinct vibe. Maybe not executed perfectly, but young filmmakers, what are you going to do?
Richard Kelly's career kind of didn't go too far, it looks like, because he did the Southland Tales in 2006. I haven't seen that. I know that title. That's got a bunch of, The Rock is in that. There's some famous people in that movie. And then in 2009, he did The Box with Cameron Diaz. And that's a thing where like a stranger shows up and gives them a box where if you press a button, a random person will die, but you get a bunch of money or something like that. Pretty sure
it's based on a
short story or something like that. Yeah. And then that's basically it. He produced a movie. He's involved as a producer in some movies and he's written a few others, but 2010, that's the last like film credit he's got, except for TBA, untitled Rod Serling biopic. That could be something. Rod Serling is the Twilight Zone dude, so maybe Richard Kelly can win me over once again.
Well, and they keep I know there's like an S. Darko movie, and they keep talking about some sort of remake or whatever. Like the story continues or is remade or reimagined in some way. So we might see more of the Darko situation at some point. Yeah, I think this would have worked well, maybe like as a series or a limited series or something, where you could explore some of those things that didn't feel very well developed.
Oh no, yeah, you know what? We're gonna get a Netflix series of this, aren't we? Oh, honestly, it would work. I've been watching that show you told me about.
Yes, I was gonna say everyone should just go watch Dark.
Yeah.
On Netflix. That's a great time travel, beautifully made a series.
Yeah. I think you could take this, like this totally feels like it could work as a, I mean, you know, don't stretch it out to like 12 episodes. Do like a 6 episode mini series on that and it would work. I don't want them to actually do that. I don't think they should make a sequel.
I don't either.
That 2009 one, he was not involved with that. I think he's pretty unhappy with it. And I watched a little bit of the trailer on YouTube and it looked bad. Did not look good.
Let Sleeping Donnie's lie. You know, it's iconic. It's classic. We really shit on it pretty badly. We really picked it apart. But I mean, I think it's a good movie and I enjoyed watching it. And again, it's such an iconic piece of film that was so influential for so many people.
Yeah, and like I know I was pretty harsh on it, but like these are feelings I've had to get off my chest for like 20 years. I need it documented. All right, folks, I think that'll do it. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Ex Post Watcho. We'd appreciate it if you could give us a rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you are using. If you'd like to get in contact with us and tell us that actually Donnie Darko is the best movie ever and explain to us all the time travel, you can email us at expostwatcho@gmail.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at expostwatcho. We'll be back next week as we watch Rodney Dangerfield classic, Ladybugs. Until then, we wish you the best of health. May you continue to be disappointed by Donnie Darko for many years to come.